Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And I'm Danielle Crittenden. And Christina has some good Twitter news. I saw you over the weekend and you looked happy and rested.
It was like getting a beauty treatment. And
tell everybody your secret.
I stayed off Twitter for the weekend.
The whole weekend?
Well, I went back on Sunday night, but I just didn't. And now I'm on it less and less.
You had a Twitter Shabbat. You had a Twitter intervention.
I did. It was a Twitter intervention. No, I was involved in some passionate confrontation. And then a tweet came from Dave Rubin who said, Christina, go off the grid. I dare you until Sunday or till. And I thought,
you did it on a dare?
And okay. And I seriously wondered if I could do it and if it would be harder to. The hardest thing in my life was quitting smoking when I was 23. Mm-hmm. I loved smoking. I couldn't imagine not doing it. I'd done it since I was 16. And I thought, this is going to be like the time I tried to. And it was nothing. I didn't miss it. In fact, a couple of times I would pick up my phone in accident and it just felt, these like a relief. I think I was released from the grasp of a raging madman.
It's strange that hold that the subliminal hold that electronics have for us, because I find that if I leave my phone at home when I go for a walk, I have an exponentially better walk. It's like
But when you realize, sometimes I do that by accident, and then I have a momentary panic.
No, but to actually put it down and walk backwards slowly from your phone, it really does exercise a grip over your brain, I find, even when you're not using it. So and you do feel a lot better. And suddenly it's like you're looking at the world and you don't have this kind of, I don't know, I want to say gun to your head, but it's really a phone to your head.
But then at a certain moment I thought, well, what do people do to relax? Because usually I'll just go and lie down and get onto it.
Right. There's no such thing as hobbies. I remember having a profound moment of realization a couple of years ago. I was in Hungary. I was in Budapest. And, of course, when you travel still, that when you are not on Wi-Fi, of course, you can't go on your phone. So because the rates are too high. The roaming rates are too high. So
I'm just afraid you're going to tell me about some horrible hobby like whittling.
No.
Polishing rocks.
So we were walking through
your
the
garage
street.
Or rock polish.
No, listen. We were walking through the streets of Budapest, and then my husband David went into a pharmacy to get some stuff, and I was sitting outside. I was sitting on a bench, and I realized my default setting to look at my phone, I didn't have it, obviously. I had to look at people. I had to sit there and watch passersby. And it was suddenly like being you remember sitting in a cafe in Paris and that's what you did? You didn't have phones. You just sat and you watched people.
Well,
it was
I had
the most
the International
interesting
Herald
show.
Tribune.
Well, that and then
did
you
the crossword puzzle.
Right. But I realized that sense of just sitting and watching people walk by and taking interest in your surroundings.
You were in Vienna?
No, in Budapest.
In Budapest.
Well, we've got lots to discuss this show. We have the stories that caught our eye this week. And Christina, I showed you a story that I found really interesting, and you got so mad.
My blood pressure's going up. Wait a minute. Okay. Go.
And you weren't even coming off a Twitter spat, and you were already getting mad. Okay, so this article was in The Guardian, and it's called "The Deadly Truth About a World Built for Men," and it's excerpted from a book by a woman named Carolyn Criado Perez, who's a prominent feminist in the UK. But what I found really interesting about it is she noted that, she writes, for most of human history, going back to the theory of man the hunter, the lives of men have been taken to represent those of humans overall. So her point is that whether it's the most basic standard of office temperature setting that was in the 60s, that if why are women always cold in offices, it's because the standard temperature was set to the metabolic resting rate of men in the 1960s, and apparently that doesn't correspond with women, to more deadly things like body armor, that the body armor that, say, that female police officers will wear doesn't fit them properly, and that's resulted in deaths and serious injuries. So it was this taking issue with this notion that standards are all based on male standards, and how can we start expanding and getting beyond that view and looking at how women have been impacted by these basic settings.
I found this transphobic because I don't think the category of male and female is stable. No, to be serious, I found it annoying at so many levels, even though there are, certain, some of her points are well taken, but overall the framing, the deadly truth about a world built for men. Well, I'll tell you about the deadly truth, which is that there was a report, not like her advocacy study, but a serious report by the World Health Organization that came out in 2014 that said in most parts of the world, health outcomes among boys and men continue to be substantially worse than those among girls and women. And then they explain how this is a little-known fact. And they have data. They said these poorer health rates reflect several factors: greater levels of occupational exposure to physical and chemical hazards, and that men are exposed to just greater dangers and die. 96% of the deaths in Europe are in workplace fatalities are men. Well, 94% in the United States. So why couldn't she just? What I would like to see is, instead of framed in this sort of women are victims, mode, this women are victims industrial complex. Why does it have to be framed that way? It just turns out...
To be fair, it wasn't that argumentative. And she made the point that, yes, we have a lot of data on men and in these work-related occupational deaths. But she also pointed out that we don't have a lot of data on women in their industries, in their deaths, often because some of the work they do is from home, so you don't get the occupational hazard data. She also pointed out there in industries like nail salons and chemicals, that these are overwhelmingly female-dominated industries. They're exposed daily to all kinds of chemicals, and we just don't track that kind of thing. So she would argue to that, Christina, that it's not that men aren't suffering more, but we're keeping track of them better than we're keeping track of women.
Well, as I said, if she had said that we should pay attention to gender in terms of workplace fatalities, workplace accidents, exposure to risk, and showed that it's complicated, that would be fine. But it's never that way. It's always in this whiny thing. And she brings up...
I find it whiny.
Well, I found it both alarmist and, for most of human history, this has been the perspective, going back to the theory of man the hunter. First of all, there's no theory of man the hunter. There's the theory of man as a hunter-gatherer, but never mind. And the lives of men represent humans overall. And she talks about, for example... She despairs the fact that we have these dummies that are used for car accidents.
Yeah, the crash test dummies.
Right. But we've corrected that, and now they use both male and female.
Well, and they have to use child size as well.
But I think they should have...
Pet size.
Pets. No, I think they should have... I mean, first of all, it says, it's the model is the 6'1", 170-pound man. What American is that size? They should have for obese people. I'm sure they have different vulnerabilities. So if you want to say that we should accommodate different sizes and so forth, but what she does is just focus on this standard narrative.
Well, no, here's the things the other things I found interesting. So she noted that the standard brick fits a man's hand, but is too wide for a woman's. You might say, who cares? But it's kind of interesting. We know now, like in health research, that we've talked about this before, that the way that women experience heart attacks in no way resembles the way men experience heart attacks. And we're just learning now that we don't theatrically... but there's not a lot of education on that. I think, this is the most compelling, and I think you're going to agree with me, fact that she had, which is toilet queues in the theater. Now, she noted that men and women in all these, building theater is a great example because there's a rush to the bathroom, as everyone knows, at intermission, and that when they look at architectural plans of theaters, men and women are allotted the same space. And we know that men and women go to the bathroom differently.
We have to fix our hair, put on our lipstick.
Yeah, but we also, we need more time in our cubicle potentially, and that's never accounted for. So I think you and I could get behind the expand toilet space for women in public buildings.
Think if you're an architect and you're designing a building and it's going to, you factor in the costs, and to have much larger space for women for the bathroom. Do people really care? Do people?
You've ever stood in one? Yeah, you do.
I know, but enough.
It's not like, and that's the other thing. She points out that when they make them sort of gender-neutral bathrooms, and the men all come into the women's bathroom, but women aren't going to go into a place with urinals.
Urinals,
so
they're filthy
and awkward, but
weird.
Anyway, that's. I found it an interesting idea. I understand that her data might be affected by advocacy, but I thought she raised a good point, Christina.
And there's a big market to make bricks, the grip of women.
I like petite bricks.
Because we all want to be bricklayers, and there's so many female bricklayers. She seems to be fetching. And this thing about the temperature, you could look at it. Look, this is the thing. You can do whatever you want, and with this kind of data. And there's a juggernaut. This marching. Hundreds and hundreds of organizations looking for any possible disadvantage for women, and very few people defending men. It's not that I want to defend men. It's just that I've watched 30 or 40 years of just one-sided analysis. They look for disparate impact, but only the impact on women. Now, you could look at men in the workplace. A lot of them have to wear suits. They have to wear jackets. And women, we can wear sundresses.
Not on casual Friday.
That's true.
Yeah,
but they still have to have long sleeve.
But then we have to do makeup and hair, and
I know.
We could go down a long road with this. All right, that's enough of that. What is your article of the week?
Oh, my article of the week was written by me.
What?
Yes, I just had a piece that came out in Politico. They asked me what I thought was the biggest challenge facing women in the United States, and the biggest challenge facing women in
the world,
the developing world. I interpret it to mean.
What did you say?
Well, what I said was that the threat of harm is a human constant, but that by any reasonable measure, American women are among the safest and freest and most opportunity-rich women on earth. And in many ways, we're not doing as well as men. We're doing better. And I worry, I think it's a challenge that like on the college campus and increasingly across the culture, young women are being taught that they're vulnerable and fragile and in imminent danger. There's this kind of trauma-centered feminism that has taken over. And its focus isn't equality with men, but protection from them. So I just said that there's this new ethic of fear and fragility, that it's poisonous and debilitating, but it's gaining ground. And I think American women have to resist the urge to pretend the world is rigged against them when it's not.
Well, especially when you compare the situation of American women to
exactly
almost any other country on
any other country.
Planet.
And it's not that we don't have challenges. Of course we do. But we have so many blessings. And it's in so many parts of the world, in Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Cambodia. I mean, women are contending with practices like honor killings and genital mutilation, acid burnings, child marriage. The good news is that, and that I find exciting, is that increasingly in these countries, Saudi Arabia and so forth, there are educated women, more and more of them, and they're just not. They're beginning.
Would that be your challenge for the developing, if we can say that, countries?
Yes, because
more education, because educated women are the force of the future.
Yes,
for any country.
They are facing formidable challenges, but they have these fantastic women, and we've been to these international women's conferences where you meet I met this woman was known as she's both Mother Teresa and Rambo. She's Dr. Holly Abdi, and she's created this city where refugees can go, people, really the most endangered children and women and men. and she's provided shelter, but it's grown to thousands, and it's like now become like a model society in the middle of Somalia. And this is this educated. She's a doctor. She's a lawyer, and there's this woman in Saudi Arabia who was the first to drive a car. She just got in her car and against the law, and took a video and then posted it on YouTube.
It's incredible, but that is true bravery.
It's amazing.
But wait a second, was she wearing a burqa so her face was concealed?
Well, there are these fantastic women in Iran, and I think it's, I forget what day it is, a day of the week. It's called White Monday or White Wednesday. They take off their veil and they dance in the street and take videos and put it on YouTube, and it drives the mullahs crazy. But they risk being lashed and taken, so forth. So there's this critical mass of educated, brave, resolute women on the march. So there's a lot of good news, but huge challenge. So I tried to just paint pictures of two societies and where we were, and to warn against this culture of fragility, because American young women could do so much to help people like Dr. Abdi, and they're at these international women's conferences, they're asking for our help, and yet on so many of our campuses, these young women at our most elite campuses, they're turned inward on their own oppression when they're not oppressed.
Well, this leads me into my other favorite article of the week, which was Google refuses to remove Saudi government app that lets men monitor women and control where they go. It's called the Abshir app that lets men grant and rescind travel permissions for Saudi women.
It alerts them if they
use a passport, stopping many from fleeing the country. And the U.S. politicians have demanded that the app be removed from Apple and Google has refused, and Apple is accused of stalling its probe.
Weren't they supposed to not be evil? This is evil. And these men it's like, why don't they just put a computer chip in, the way I have with my dog, in their wives, they can follow them around. I mean, it's oppressive and disgusting.
Well, I mean, to be fair, when you live in a society where every woman is dressed in the exact same burqa, like let's say you're in the supermarket and you can't find your wife, right? Like, is she in the fruit aisle or is she in the frozen aisle? And that's helpful, right? Like, because they can't tell their wife.
They should have I have a Google Watch, and the thing I use most, I can't use most of these, but you can go like that, and you go, and it tells you where your iPhone is. Okay, I didn't.
So you could just, where is your wife?
Watch, and just go find out where she is.
I bet it does. But, you sort of look at this, like, as you say, the sort of evilness of this. I mean, would Google support, a Russian government eavesdropping app that they're already in hot water over, like, Facebook with the interference in the election and these fake stories and bots? This is the problem, the danger of technology in our pockets. I mean, our phones track us anyway. You can have these apps for your kids in this, there's a parent app. If you want to know where your kid really went Saturday night, you can install that.
Well, I thought everybody had those. I have those for both the boys,
even though they're grown up. Went to the beer store again. So. But I had this I thought, okay, well, what if there was an app for women to track their husbands, and I realized we don't need that. Because women are the CIA sex. Have you ever thought about this?
Because men are predictable.
Men are predictable? We once had a friend who was a long-time bachelor, and he got married, much later in life. He's a sort of guy, he's a bon vivant. He always just had, if you went to his fridge, it'd be just like a bottle of champagne in it, long-time bachelor, Henry Higginstein. He got married, and then he had lunch with a friend of his, and he said, "It's like being married
to the Stasi."
You go out, and then you come home, and they ask you where you were and who did you see. Or they always want to know what time you're going to get back.
But I always sort of knew where Fred, if he wasn't home, there were two possible places, and that was it, and there was never variation.
Well, David and I have this game. I think this is another great thing that women can do, that I can always tell who he's on the phone with. And I don't need he'll pick up and he'll go, "Hey there." And I'll say hi to your sister for me. And he'll look at me like, how did you know? I only said one phrase, So now he actually will hang up the phone and say, okay, who was I talking to? It's not like I'm eavesdropping. I just know. But so maybe we have natural antenna and we don't need apps.
It sounds like you do eavesdrop a little bit.
Maybe not. Anyway, I just wish I would take that app for you, though, Christina, to know where you were, what you were doing.
I think that co-splainers should have apps, tracking apps, because
tracking us. Where are we at 7 p.m. and what are we drinking?
So we can find the drink.
All right. Well, we're going to bring on our guests now, Heather Heying. Christina, if you want to set up the story, I'll just say quickly the fem fact. She's an evolutionary biologist. She's author of the controversial, joking, Antipode, Seasons with the Extraordinary Wildlife and Culture of Madagascar. But if you haven't heard of her, the reason we're having her on is because
she was a professor at Evergreen State, wife of Bret Weinstein, and they were sort of driven out of the school. They're both liberal, bordering on socialist, I'm not sure. But they were driven out of the school by politically correct mob.
Every year, minorities at the college would have a day where they didn't show up, and this was to make people aware of their contributions and through their absence. And then in 2017, the minority students reversed that idea and said all white people or white students have to stay away.
Rage, anger and rage.
But the specific
stay
thing,
away.
White people should not come to campus. And Bret Weinstein stayed, and then got terrible threats. And
kids were hid on the campus with baseball bats.
Right, they were told they would not be safe. And she can tell us a little bit about this. But we're sort of interested to find out what happens to someone 2 years on. We hear a lot about these cases with these professors and others who have had their lives upturned.
She's
in
a
these
professor
situations.
in exile. We're going to hear all about it.
And let's find out what happened. So let's go to Heather. Welcome, Heather Heying, to the podcast. And Heather, I understand, I think I mispronounced it when I introduced you. It rhymes with flying.
It rhymes with flying.
Okay.
You pronounced it correctly just now. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome.
Hi, Heather. It's Christina. Great to talk to you.
Hi, Christina. Good to talk to you again.
How's Portland?
I love Portland, actually. I think it has much of the best and some of the worst of what progressivism and liberalism has to offer. And as someone who is very firmly on that side of the political spectrum, I embrace the best and hoping to help change the course of the authoritarian left that has taken over so much of the public discourse.
I know. It's such a crazy city because it's just this model of entrepreneurship and small stores and in little businesses just thriving and competition and meritocracy, and then the politics are to the left of Cuba.
Right. Yeah. I think there is so much individual entrepreneurship, as you say, in which people ask to and are responded to, are embraced for letting their freak flag fly, for being their own weird thing, however that manifests. And that part of it is wonderful. It's not a place where you have to hide who you are, what you think, how you like to dress, except for this new authoritarian movement that is taking over, hardly just the city government and occasionally the streets of Portland, but as we're all familiar with, university campuses and corporate boardrooms and cubicles throughout the country.
Now, because you're on the Femsplainers, we have to start with our most important question. What is your favorite cocktail?
Of course. I guess I would have to say caipirinha.
Explain.
Explain. How do you make it? I say that as I pour my
white wine.
White wine.
Beautiful. It's a little early where I am for that, but
Never
I'm
too
with you
early.
in spirit, if not in spirits. Caipirinha is kind of a Brazilian mojito, and I love a mojito as well.
Same.
But a caipirinha is made not with rum, but its sister spirit, which is cachaça, which is a sugarcane distilled spirit, and then muddled lime and mint muddled together and turned into something. Actually, maybe a caipirinha doesn't even have mint. So, I say it's my favorite, but I haven't.
Well, I'll get the spelling later from you and look it up. But I remember Christopher Hitchens said that a mojito is no good unless it looks like a fish aquarium.
Looks like a what now?
A fish aquarium. It has to be so much mint and muddlement that, or muddling that. Well, let me ask you something. We realize this is like the second anniversary of the protests that saw you and your husband Bret eventually leave Evergreen State College.
Yes.
And at the time, even though you went through this horrific ordeal, there were a lot of students you wrote who supported you, and you ended up leaving in September of 2017, so after March. So it wasn't immediate. It wasn't like you were kicked off the campus. Tell us what happened, and tell us why you both decided to resign and leave.
It's a damn near impossible story to tell in brief, but both Bret and I truly loved Evergreen. We loved teaching there, and we still find much to recommend the educational model. It is distinct, or it has been until recently, from every other college or university in the known universe, frankly, and with its full-time programs. And so, our students knew how much we respected and loved them, as did many other people on campus. And so when the protests erupted on May 23rd of 2017, for a few weeks it was chaos, and it was terrifying, and it was utterly confusing in almost every regard. And it quickly became clear that the college did not have our backs, that what they were going to do rather than support us in any way was in fact to hire a PR firm, which has since been enhanced to the degree of a full division of the college, in order to basically slander us. So rather than fix the internal problems which led to the protests in the first place, they decided to try to scapegoat first Bret and then ultimately both of us. I had been on sabbatical when it happened, so I was not really visible in the story in the beginning. So we hoped throughout that summer. That happened about 3 weeks before the end of classes on the West Coast, and we tend to go later. So graduation didn't happen for 3 or 4 weeks even after the protests first happened. But once graduation happened and campus was calm simply because of it not being very populated, we filed, it's been a while since I've thought about the language here. You can't file a tort claim right away. You have to file an intention to file a tort claim and then let the other person, in this case the college, they get 60 days to respond. And so something like early July, we finally got all the paperwork together. And we're hoping all summer, let's do this. Let's sit down with the college. And one of the things that happened as a result of the very public way that Evergreen blew up, because the protesters, who many people have objected to calling them protesters, and I agree, they were activists. Most of them weren't even students. They were basically anarchists from off-site who came in and drummed up trouble with the help of a few core faculty. We were hoping to be able to turn the reputation of Evergreen around to what it could be, to being an actually inclusive and wonderful liberal arts college, which was the experience we had always had for 15 years of teaching in our classrooms. And the college wouldn't talk to us the entire summer. We got nothing. It turns out that the president, who really is ultimately responsible for what was allowed to happen, took all of July off. He went on vacation. And we were left, along with our lawyers, former ACLU lawyers whom we had hired, to wonder what the hell is going on.
Was it just emotionally devastating to wait like that and be so uncertain?
Utterly, completely devastating. And, there is much good that has emerged from it. Not least, I'm here with you both now, and I've met and am now in conversation with and am working towards better ways of dealing with problems like this in the world in a way that neither Bret nor I had that kind of audience before. We were doing, I think, quite exquisite work to very small groups of undergraduates at a time, with very small groups of undergraduates at a time. And it was very hard to break out of that. And we never wanted this. We never would have asked for this, but boy, that worked, right? That was a result of a bunch of very confused young people led by some fanatic faculty who should have known better, and in fact, some of them did know better, creating a problem that resulted in, frankly, it still looks like, at least, if not the death of the college, the death of the educational model.
Are the faculty, are those faculty still there?
One of them left, and all of the others are still there, as far as I know. And the mood on campus we still have friends there, and when I talk to them, faculty and staff who were there, they report that it is grim. It is not only has faculty hiring stopped and have arts programs been cut and science support has been cut and the pool has been closed for lack of funds, although that's not the explanation they gave, and on and on and on with the financial cuts. But in terms of being able to speak your mind, it's even worse than it was.
Well, what's interesting to me, Heather, is that you're both biologists, right? Like, you're not even in that usual controversial slot of the humanities or history, which has become so politicized. So how have you coped in the 2 years since leaving? I mean, here you are, this biologist. You love wandering through rainforests. Teaching, it seems it was your passion. What happens to someone who is forced out in that way?
The question is an excellent one, and I think the answer in part is why so many people are silent. Many people are silent because they actually have their heads in the ground and they don't see it, or they can convince themselves that the little glimmers around the edges that they do see of this ideological madness that is becoming the new orthodoxy isn't really happening. But a lot of people do see it. They really do, and they don't speak up, in part because they see what happens to people who do. And Bret and I have both been lucky, and we happen to have a skill set, both individually, 3 skill sets individually and combined, that is somewhat emergent from the individual skill sets, that was capable of transforming this into a situation such that we didn't fall through the cracks. We aren't looking for adjunct gigs at community colleges, which was something I was doing that first summer, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? But it doesn't, because of, in part, it's no accident that we were at this weird little public liberal arts college in the Pacific Northwest. It's actually no accident at all, because used to be, Evergreen was capable of hiring for weirdos. For one-off people who were more generalist than specialists and who may have had particular insight into what their specialty was, but they weren't prepared to be sharing that with their field for a number of reasons. And so, Bret and I are in many ways generalists, which, as you're well aware, isn't what academia rewards right now. And it's part of the problem, right? It's that so many people are in their little silos that they got a PhD in something that was narrow, and it shouldn't be a surprise that those people are then expected to teach and don't know how. They don't know how to think outside of their narrow training, and they tend to repeat exactly the errors that were done to them, rather than engage students as humans. One of the errors that many faculty make, and there are actually many faculty are proud of this error, is imagining that the only thing they're there for is to teach the brains. And it's like you've got a classroom of brains in jars, and everything else about the students, all of their humanity, their bodies and their psychologies and their emotions and their developmental histories is not relevant in the classroom. That's what student affairs is for. That's what the counseling center is for. That's what the health center is for. That's what their off time is for. And because Evergreen's model allowed for a deep dive, not just into content, but into community, into really getting to know students extremely well, we were able to learn who these people were at a deep level. And so, it's particularly egregious when I hear some of the ideologues say, we need inclusion and diversity statements because if you don't know a person's take on this, you're not teaching in an inclusive way. Well, no, actually, I know those people who say that. I know some of them, and yes, it's a small sample size, but by and large, those aren't the people who know how to teach. Those are the people who actually, behind closed doors, disdain students. And students can tell.
Right. You know what bothers me is I think of a school like Evergreen State and just other colleges where this is going on, and they're eliminating these wonderful programs that were truly inclusive and changing kids' lives, getting rid of biology positions, but now they've got, feminist intersectional slam poetry. You can take courses in that, which is just, it's pathetic. And yet
it is.
It seems unstoppable sometimes. Like we're just going to have to go through this. But my hope is that they picked on the wrong people, that you and Bret are not only brilliant, but you also have insights into systems and how they work. So you may come up with a solution to what we could do to save American education.
Well, that is one of the projects that I'm not ready to talk about publicly just yet, but that we are hopefully trying to work on is exactly that, because we need a functional academy, right? Every successful civilization needs a functional academy in which young people can go to learn to think, right? And we have now so many options for learning facts. And, put aside for the moment the fact that, some facts don't turn out to be true, but Khan Academy and Coursera and, MOOCs across the board and Wikipedia provide an opportunity to learn a litany of facts. But what you can't learn, certainly from Wikipedia, and even particularly well with online learning, where you never have a direct interaction with another human being, is how to fact check yourself. Like what is the logic? How is it that you learn how to understand if what you said is true or not? How could you predict whether what you've said is true or not? And how can you do better in the future? And that's what I was doing in the classroom, and as was Bret, and as were a handful of other people at Evergreen, and I assume at every university and college across the country, that there are academics everywhere who are trying to engage students, and successfully so, in the ways of both logic and compassion. Because when you do so, it's a lot more work. It's a lot more work than coming in with a prepared script and not allowing students to veer you from it at all. But the students respond with enthusiasm and with love, frankly, and they work hard because they see that you can see them and that you want them to succeed. Those are the students I saw.
Here's what I'm worried about that we're seeing developing, that there's this kind of toxic ecosystem that is developing between the social justice warriors and people like you, its victims. And we're almost creating a culture of conservative victimhood, that the SJWs are creating their own victims, and then the victims come out and take on the status of victimhood, something we're trying to get away. Does that make sense? And how do you cope with that? How do you remain a person, a teacher, and not a cause?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I have so many answers to that. I think one thing that came up for me when you were talking was I believe it's your term, equity feminism.
Yes.
Right, Christina?
Yeah.
That equity feminism is, to me, the feminism that I came of age in. So I'm almost 50, and I watched my mother and for a brief time her business partner, who was also sort of a secondary mom to me, do extraordinary work. And they weren't talking about the fact that they were women doing it, but they were just doing it. And as I then came of age and moved forward in my career, it felt like we were moving in the right direction. So being wistful for a moment 20 and 30 years ago, when the gains of first and second wave feminism were moving us in the right direction, is that conservative now? No, I don't think so, because it's not craving a moment in time. It's craving a trajectory that was actually liberal, that was, I believe, actually progressive.
And liberating.
And liberating.
I mean, look at you. You went and camped around, I don't know, Madagascar or somewhere, and had all these adventures. That's what feminism was about.
Exactly. And, I now hear these women saying, I can't go out at night alone. And I'm saying, I live in a tent on an island off the coast of Madagascar alone. Like, are you serious?
I'm afraid of my roommate. I can't go to a bar.
Right. I mean, it's the fear that is the problem. And this is, it's crazy that we have to say this, but, this is not to pretend that sexual assault doesn't happen and that sexual harassment doesn't happen and that, most young women are likely to get harassed, and some of them, daily. I certainly had a spell of my young life like that, and I didn't like it, and I wished it were different. But, being yelled at on the street is not the same thing as sexual assault, first of all. And if you respond to that by saying, I need to go hide, you are just going to make matters worse in your own head than if you respond to that by saying, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here.
Yes, go ahead. We have an explicit rating.
Okay. You're far better off if you respond to being, catcalled with, fuck you anyway. This is my street as much as it is yours, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be safe about it, and I'm not going to invite trouble, but I'm going to go out into the world, and God forbid something bad happens to me, and it will happen to some people, as bad things will happen to some men, but you have to take control of your own destiny rather than hiding and proclaiming that fear is the only response.
Well, to that point, Heather, you said earlier, and this goes back to my idea of sort of embracing, I think some do, this idea of conservative victimhood. It becomes a kind of identity. And earlier you said that you felt something good had come out of this, that you'd gotten a greater audience than your narrower biology students.
She met me. We've had dinner in Portland, and we had dinner at my house, and we met all these. That happened to me too.
Tell us
you
about
lose
this.
some friends, but you meet so many wonderful people.
So how have you survived? It sounds like not becoming a conservative victim, quote unquote.
Right. Well, I mean, it's as I'm sure you both have noticed, when you come out publicly as someone who rejects the new orthodoxy on I call it the pseudo-left, there are many people who are eager to both denounce you as being on the right, as if that were a bad thing, but also people from the right embracing you. Finally, you've come to our side. Mm-hmm. And the embracing I appreciate, but no, I'm not on the right. I have some fundamentally liberal views with regard to the need for government to regulate industry and systems that are too large for individuals to do.
And protect people.
And protect people, right. And certainly over in what used to be called liberal in the 90s, all of those social issues around being pro-choice and pro-gay marriage and such, I could tick off all of those boxes, although it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be that kind of a litmus test. And so it's allowed, I do not think that any of my political positions have changed. In part, what Bret and I were doing, yes, we were teaching things like the evolution of parental care and territoriality and sexual selection, and that it sounds kind of dry, or I can make that sound dry, but the fact is that we were doing animal behavior, which includes humans, and we taught a lot about and thought a lot and have original contributions to make on what it is that humans are and how it is that humans have evolved and what that means about what this extraordinarily novel set of environmental pressures that we're now experiencing in the 21st century mean for us as evolved beings. We are humans for sure, and we're post-industrialists, but we also retain all of these parts of our history with ever less perfection to the, what the original was. So, we're also, almost all of us, agriculturalists, if you go far enough back. And before that, we're hunter-gatherers. And before that, we are other kinds of apes and monkeys and primates and mammals and reptiles and fish too. And so you can learn from all of those, in that case, more and more inclusive pieces of history, things that are true about what we are. And that was what we were doing with students, and that was, that is the kind of science that both of us have been doing, all along. And so it also, I think, is no surprise that we end up being able to, as many others have, but it's very often the people with the explicit background in evolutionary biology who are standing up and saying, you know what? Male and female is a binary. Now, gender roles,
watch out.
So much.
Watch out.
Right? Gender roles, not so much. It's strongly bimodal, but, I can talk your ear off about this. And I just don't have, I think it's unlikely that anyone's going to throw a question or an argument at me that I haven't already heard, because I've been working through this material and trying to figure out what the flaws are in it for decades at this point.
Can I ask her about the intellectual dark web?
Yeah.
Because didn't your brother-in-law coin the phrase?
He did.
Eric.
Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, that's
he
right.
works
Eric
for Peter Thiel, right?
He is the managing director for Thiel Capital. That's right. But his coining of the phrase and everything about the so-called ADW has nothing to do with Peter. I think Eric, if memory serves, coined the phrase on stage with Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro. Boy, at this point, early 2018, maybe.
Huh.
And then Barry Weiss picked up that baton and ran with it.
And then there was the photo of all of us in the dark,
looking evil.
Yeah.
But I like IDW, the intellectual dark web.
No, blonde web. We're the blonde.
We're the intellectual blonde web. And Heather will be, not yet. She's too young to go blonde, but someday.
So Eric has posted a YouTube video explaining the origin of the term. In part it was ironic. It was supposed to get under people's skin, and it did.
It
right?
did. They get so it makes people. I was on a podcast with Robert Wright, and he's so bothered by the idea, and others are the same.
But it bothers me too. Why are this sort of intellectual free speech? Why is that dark? That's what bothers me. Like we're in some weird dark space when you're arguing sort of liberal democratic ideas. That's what bothers me.
Yeah, because that's where we are.
It ought not be in the dark, but the point is that we have been pushed into the shadows. That just as we were talking about earlier, when we come out saying things like the kinds of things we're saying, we are often told you're right wing, or of course you're alt right, you're Nazis, all of these absurd
white supremacist, fascist,
white supremacist, transphobes, fascists, internal misogynists, right? All of these things, and you're rape apologists. I'm sure you've gotten.
Well, in fact, we're homeless, right? We're politically homeless.
Yes,
and yet. I know for sure at this point there are so many people who actually have core beliefs that are liberal, that are looking for people on the left to talk about. And, that is a big part of what the IDW, as it were, is doing. And, of course, the people identified as in the IDW are actually legitimately across the political spectrum. Ben Shapiro is pretty far right. And, Bret and I and Sam Harris are pretty far left. I suspect, Christina anyway, that you are maybe just a little bit right of me, but not very far.
Right.
Not that any of that should be the way that we're categorizing this. But I think one of Eric's points initially in coining that, perhaps even off the cuff, I'm not sure, the term intellectual dark web was, these are ideas, these are ways of talking. There is a spirit of inquiry that should be in the light, but where's the mainstream media? Like, where is the embrace of inquiry and actual disagreement without conflating dislike of a dislike of an idea with disrespect for a human being.
Now, when all of that happened to you at Evergreen, did the New York Times cover it?
Not at first. They, ultimately they did, and of course they ended up being 3 pieces on the op-ed pages. But of course, that's different.
Yeah.
No one from the mainstream media did at first, and this is part of the immediate story, which was 2 days after the protests broke out. There was literal anarchy on campus. The president had told the police chief and her force, the campus police chief and her force, to stand down. There were people hunting from car to car for someone whom they would not name, but the police chief was sure was Bret Weinstein, my husband. His students were being followed in the forest. It's a very wooded campus, 1,000 acres of mostly forest, and doxxed. One of them was approached at her home. And we, Bret and I and his students, I didn't have any at the time because I was on sabbatical, went to the Capitol. Olympia, which is where Evergreen is in the state capital of Washington. So 8 miles from campus, we went and we asked for an audience with the governor, Governor Inslee, who has just in the last couple of days declared his candidacy for presidency in 2020. And they said he wasn't there. I have no idea if this is true. But we got an audience for a couple of hours, actually, with his aides on higher ed and on civil rights. And we told them, this is a dangerous situation on campus. There is anarchy building. There have been things bordering on riots. There are students who are being assaulted. We need help. And no help came. No help ever came. And so at the point that Fox News called, Tucker Carlson's people called, 3 days after the protests had begun, Bret and I looked at each other and thought, oh shit, what is it we're supposed to do here? And we can't get anyone to pay attention except for the thousands, tens of thousands, ultimately hundreds of thousands, for all I know, millions of people who observed some fraction of the videos that had initially been put on Facebook and then by someone else, dragged over to YouTube. YouTube was going crazy, but the mainstream media was ignoring it because it didn't fit into any sanctioned narrative. And it's that sanctioned narrative thing that is what the intellectual dark web is about, what they're referring to.
Right, and I assume you don't want to become a Tucker Carlson puppet either, right?
Of course not. Now, no one should want to be anyone's puppet. Mm-hmm. However, I will say, Bret did it. We said, you know what? We actually think we have no choice. This is actually really dangerous, like actually becoming a physically dangerous situation. And he went on, and it was very short and very clipped, and the response from the campus, where we had once been beloved, was immediate and hostile and retaliatory. And Bret's email blew up. I was monitoring his email at the time, trying to keep up with hundreds, thousands of emails from Fox viewers who had seen it and who said things like, I'm on the right, I'm on the left, I'm in the center, I'm young, old, black, white, disabled, whatever. I'm any number of these things. And you and I, sir, Bret, almost certainly disagree about a number of things, but I feel confident that I could sit down and have a conversation with you. And I cannot tell you how long it's been since I felt like I could converse with someone with whom I had disagreements. Thank you. And for me, that was one of the scales falling from the eyes moments. At the point that the people at Evergreen said absurd things like, when Bret went on Fox, the world moved to the right, which is one of the things that we have in writing from a faculty member at Evergreen, I thought, nope. Actually, it began to open up the world. We began to be able to see how many good people there are out there who identify as all sorts of things that might have kept us from conversing before. But you know what? This is what liberalism is supposed to be about. This is about sharing ideas, sharing viewpoints, actually sitting down with people with whom you disagree. And with regard to Tucker Carlson, he was respectful, and we both came to respect him. And I've never met him or interacted with him, but I said to Bret at that point, if he invites you back on, you should go.
Well, when I
actually did good.
When I both Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who's in the intellectual dark web, one thing she and I used to talk about is she was sort of a liberal, not quite a socialist, but very much on the left. But she was rejecting radical Islam and fled to the United States. I wrote a book called Who Stole Feminism as a liberal feminist, pro-choice, registered Democrat, pro-gay, everything. But I was criticizing the radicals. Both Ayaan and I initially thought that liberals would embrace me because I was defending liberalism, and so was she. And it was AEI, a conservative think tank, that took us in. And it was, I got calls from the national, from the editor of the National Review and from the Weekly Standard and places like that would listen to me, even though I was.
And this is now used as evidence of your being right wing, right? Like I've seen this lobbed against you, Christina.
Right.
Because you're AEI, you must be on the right, and they've cut it backwards, right? Where were the liberals? Where was the supposed
and forget about me. Where were they for Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Fleeing, and
yes. She
became an untouchable on the left. Mm-hmm. And why didn't a liberal or a feminist think tank take her in? No, it was AEI.
Well, let me be a bit of a stinky cheese here, Heather, which is my phrase for my role in life. There is a problem, and I'm not saying in any way that you were wrong to go on Tucker Carlson or he didn't give you the platform that you needed and was the only one. And yes, liberal media should have stepped up. But this goes back to my original question that we're feeding into narratives of what suits Tucker Carlson and Fox News, what suits the left and SJWs. And how do you as a person get beyond that? How have you survived these past 2 years?
One of the metaphors that Bret and I have used with regard to what happened to us starting most publicly, a year and 9 months ago at Evergreen is that we went through the looking glass. Mm. And from the other side, reality is still reality, but it is, to use a very fashionable phrase over in humanities academia right now, but it is a distinct shift in the lens, in the focal point, of the lens that you are looking at the world through. And I think one thing that is keeping a lot of people quiet, even as people are beginning to wake up to the nonsense that is being spouted by a frankly still pretty small number of people on the authoritarian left, but they are gaining power, is that they imagine that there's no possible way to survive on the other side. And so, I said earlier, I think it's true that some academics are looking at this going, well, there's no other possible life for me, so I can't afford to lose my job, so I'm going to be quiet. But there are a lot of other people in other positions, including many academics, for whom I would say, you know what? You stand up and you speak what you understand to be truth. I hate the phrase "your truth." It's very postmodern, but what you understand to be truth, and if you turn out to be wrong, you need to be willing to change your position. And doing this in this cultural moment, yes, some of it is about the election of Trump, but that's an excuse that people are using. This was happening a long time before Trump. You do that, you stand up, and you realize that for most people, you don't actually, you don't die metaphorically. You actually find your people. You find the people who are standing up and saying with you, saying, actually, let's hash this out. Hey, I don't agree with you on everything. Let's figure out why we each think what we do. Let's lay it out on the table and move forward. And on some topics, we may agree to disagree. And on other topics, we may actually, each of us may move the other on some topic. That is what I would say both democracy and friendship, going from the largest societal structure to the smallest maybe, ought to be about. A willingness to move in the face of contradictory evidence and compassion.
Well, that you say it so well, and I so much agree.
Thank you, Heather. This has been so great, and good luck with everything that you do, and hope you're prospering.
And I'll see you out there in the IDW. We have secret meetings. We have secret handshakes.
I'm just staying in the blonde web where we don't have to do any of those meetings, but okay.
We have cocktails.
Thank you, Heather.
My soul slides away, but don't look back in anger. I heard you say.
Well, listening to Heather, I'm reminded of something that Henry James said in The Bostonians, that you could divide all of humanity between people who take things hard and those who take things easy. And not to say that Heather has taken things easy, but she's come out of this in a very positive way, that I really do worry about conservative victimhood, and that you can get into this racket of...
No, you know what they're about? They're problem solvers.
Right.
And they were going through this horrendous experience, but they were also observing it as scientists, and they became fascinated.
Right.
And I love to talk to them because they're always sort of taking the conversation to the next level and figuring things out. And I think they may solve the problem.
Well, she did say that there's something positive. And when you're a teacher who is cut off from your métier, and look, we know a lot of people who have been in these situations, and your life is ruined by this. And can you come out of this? Can you recreate yourself? Can you do something positive from this? That's a very hard thing to do. It's so much easier to be bitter. And
but they're not about bitterness.
But they're really not.
They're brilliant, lovely people, and they're smart. And now, I think that the crazy forces out there picked on the wrong couple because they're not giving up, and they're not succumbing to victimhood. They're not becoming extremists in any way. They remain, inquisitive scientists.
Okay, well, to wind up things, we've talked about, Christina, we always want to do we have these little bits that we want to do, like Femsplainer of the Week, and then we never get to it because we get, obviously, so many things to talk about. But I want to do a Femsplainer of the Week this week. So there were these two little girls in Benbow, California. Don't ask me where Benbow is.
Benbow. Everybody knows where it is. It's outside of Dumbo.
Age 5 and 8.
Oh.
And these little girls asked their mom if they could go for a walk. And their mom said no. But the little 8-year-old mischief girl that she was packed a granola bar, took her 5-year-old sister. They went for a walk, and then they got lost. And then they found themselves, this is a rural part of California, they found themselves in the wilderness for almost 48 hours. And the little 8-year-old protected the 5-year-old. She had remembered that there were mountain lions, and so she stood awake over the 5-year-old at night because the 5-year-old was scared. And she said the way she survived, they found them, obviously. There was a massive search. They found their granola wrappers like Hansel and Gretel and their little boot prints. But they found the girls, and the 8-year-old said, well, we learned survival tips in 4-H club.
Oh, the 4-H club.
And here were these little girls, 5 and 8, that had
Coping skills.
And this is the thing, we sometimes talk about this with helicoptering parents, etc.
Yeah, a lot of kids would just, once their iPhones died,
what do I do?
What do I do? I would kind of be like that.
I just want
I don't have 4-H skills.
I don't even know what 4-H skills are.
You do. You have them.
I don't know.
I would survive, but I would not be happy, and I would cry.
But this little girl, the fact that they went through this, and this is one of the things that we have to remember, that with all this protectionism that goes on with our children and this helicopter
protectionism is dangerous.
It's dangerous.
It's endangering.
You don't want your kid to go through 48 hours of wilderness survival at 8 and 5, but on the other hand,
at least they knew they had some common sense.
Well, they're going to remember that their whole lives, and that they were put in this situation, and that they did so amazingly well. And, some of those 16-year-olds millennials could do with being sent out into the wilderness with a granola bar and see how they do. Anyway, okay, that was my Femsplainer of the week. Zoe, is there any listener reaction that we need to
I think actually I have a
listen to?
Femsplainer of the week.
Oh, wow, okay.
Her name is Leah, and she contacted us via Instagram.
Oh, okay.
And Leah says, I loved the last podcast about how crazy it is to lie about age. If you lie, it is so much better to lie up. I have been making this argument my entire life, and you guys are the only one that has ever understood me.
Leah, you look fabulous for 22.
Yeah,
so
she
this
must
is the
be very
point,
young
right?
to actually believe that.
Ladies, no, it's the older you get, the more important.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm older.
Okay, fine. But
my age is on Wikipedia. And do you remember?
really?
Yeah.
Both of your ages are.
Yours is on Wikipedia.
I don't hide my age,
I don't
dear.
either, but Charlotte Hayes, so, just this sort of, she's just kind of old-fashioned Southern lady, and she said, Christina, I saw Wikipedia. It's got your age. No woman should ever tell her age. Do something about it. And I thought, I kind of wish it was. I mean, I don't care.
Okay, you know what, Christina, as long as I've been your friend, you've never revealed your age to me, and I've never asked.
Are you serious?
Serious. So I'm going to go.
No, don't check.
I'm going to check Wikipedia.
I'm old enough to be your teenage mom.
Sister. No, I'll say it boldly. I'm 55, about to be 56 in April. But if I were to tell you I was 60 or 61, wouldn't you go, Danielle, you
Well, I
look
can tell you I'm
amazing.
68, and you'll say,
No way.
yeah, impossible.
And you're not even lying about your age.
Oh, God. But I'm older than my Aunt Rita. And she looked, no offense, she's gone, but she was so old. And now I'm like,
I know, but you're not old. And
know.
like, if you were to drop 5 years and you said if you were to say you're 70 or 75, you would look amazing.
Yeah, and I'd be like 75 in people's minds. No.
All right.
I'm taking it off Wikipedia.
Yeah, you should. Well, I
By
don't
the
know
way,
how you
these
do.
earphones, they were designed for men. And I resent it. And whenever we do interviews,
Do you think
they're like,
men have bigger ears than we do?
these are not...
They just remind me of the noise-canceling ones that like old men used to use to mow a lawn. Like my grandfather
right.
used
Like
to have
Fox
these.
News has
Yeah.
this ads. Okay, next one.
So this might be one of my favorite listener feedback moments that we've ever had. So I think it's 2 weeks ago, we posted the video of Izzy in the studio.
Yeah.
Which might be one of my favorite things we've ever posted. I think it's so funny, and I am still watching it. But someone named Sheldon reached out to us on Facebook, and he says, Izzy is a trans-exclusionary radical dog, but ignore the acronym or she'll get upset. Because the acronym is TURD.
Oh.
That doesn't, no, it cannot be.
No.
Can we just though agree that Izzy is a disruptor? Is that a compliment in modern tech terms? She's
No,
a
she's
disruptor.
exuberant.
She's a
And I think she
disruptor.
added a lot to the ambiance. And I'm bringing her next time.
No, don't ask our audio editor to agree with
We
that.
had people that commented on the video that said that was so irresponsible. Who would ever record a podcast with a dog?
We did. And I
people were
actually, as
upset.
hard as it was for me
All right,
to cope with Izzy,
dog-phobics
these were
out there,
dog-phobics. Yeah.
Forget about it. We're not going to, I want the world to be more dog inclusionary.
Right. All right. Before we go, can I just make a quick commercial pitch? We're now on Patreon, and we need your help. We need your help to pay for cocktails, for
Yeah,
Izzy's
like this.
food,
In
for Izzy's food,
obedience training.
for our audio editing. We have multiple levels, and we also, if you want to just drink with us, if you join the right level, you can ask us questions and be part of our exclusive last round.
Trans-exclusionary.
No, it's not trans-exclusionary. Our monthly super exclusive secret.
And after
Patreon.
this podcast, we have a special, really funny section with Heather.
Oh, yeah, we do. So we have little extra bits with our guests and
Involves
little extra
bikinis
bits.
and the rainforest.
Stop.
Okay, I'm just giving
it does. It does. And yes, so if you go to Patreon, you get our super exclusive episode. And yeah, you get to hang out with us and ask us questions. So please go to patreon.com/Femsplainers. And that's it for this week. Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Stay with us by following us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. You can always email questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com. We read every one.
We are part of the E1 network and record at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. And thanks to AEI Research Assistant Zoe Appler, who is our production assistant here in the studio, and thanks to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor, and occasional millennial mansplainer.
And listen to us on pretty much any of your favorite podcast platforms. And please remember to subscribe and like us at iTunes if possible. Every like helps us keep our solid 5-star rating. Cheers.